I'm Michael Opitz, your host, and I want to welcome you to our fifth Internet radio broadcast. Our show today includes my special guest host, Christina Jeffrey, Ph.D., Political Science, former House historian and college professor. In the background is James Strong, the technical producer for this show, social media consultant and editor for DecidingTheVote.com, a blog forum for politically active citizens and professionals, and everybody should go there. It's a wonderful site, and this site hosts our show. So with that being said, Christina, how are you doing today?
Well, I'm doing just fine, and got my TV on silent here, watching what's going on in the nation's capital. I guess there wasn't enough excitement up there. No,
I guess not. And we're not going to focus on that a whole lot today on today's shows because it's unfolding, and most of the time the initial news that comes out is not right or is off target. So today we're going to have Christina and I are going to have a nice conversation about a lot of topics, just the two of us and a couple of million of our listening friends. But with that, Christina, there's so much going on in the news and at the state level and the local level. It's such a whirlwind. It's hard to keep track of everything that's out there and that's coming our way faster than we can handle it. How do you keep up with it?
Well, I can't keep up with it, and I can't explain it. But it's rather nice to be teaching the Federalist Papers, and have Alexander Hamilton say, "Well, of course you can't follow what goes on in the legislature. Legislatures are too big; they're too complicated. There's not enough coverage of them, and they can do all kinds of sleight of hand kinds of things." And that's why it's important to have just one president, because you can watch him.
For a moment, I thought you were talking about our state legislature.
Well, that's true too.
Once upon a time, I thought here in Georgia, when the Republicans took over both seats, houses in the state legislature, the Senate and the House, I thought we would see a lot of good, reasonable legislation coming out of it, especially with a Republican government. And it's no secret I'm a Republican, but I've not been happy quite some time with the Republican Party. There are elements of the Republican Party that I strongly support, and then there are elements that seem a lot like Democrats.
Well, don't you suppose that's because the majority of mankind is content to go along to get along? And that's where the people come. That's why in our system the responsibility for making people do what they should do has really been placed on the people.
When the Republicans took over the House, we formed a group subsequent to the Republicans taking over the House called the 10th Amendment Coalition. We went down and lobbied for good legislation, and lobbied against bad legislation as citizen lobbyists. What we found, much to our surprise, and maybe we shouldn't have been so naive, is that the legislators really didn't seem to know much about any given piece of legislation that was flowing through, and they depended upon paid lobbyists to inform them, and they didn't know anything about the Constitution. And that was more than disappointing. So when we would ask a state legislature about any given bill and we would reference the number, he'd say, "Don't give me the number." He said, "I don't know anything about the numbers. Tell me about the bill so I'll know what you're talking about." And that was very.
In other words, give me a cue.
Give me a cue to what I'm supposed to be doing down here. That's right. And tell me whether you like it and what are the elements of it.
Because I'll probably agree with you.
It was eye-opening, and I determined then that probably, and this is just a rough guess, anywhere from 95%, 80% of the state legislatures were down there for their own benefit, and just a handful of those understood the Constitution and were down there for the best interest of the electorate. But that was an
and those people are not trusted, you know.
Elaborate.
They're not. They're there from the standpoint of the good old boys that are in the legislature for what they can get out of it. They can do business with each other. They can log roll. They can swap favors, what have you. But the somebody who's down there, you know, on behalf of the people, it's very hard to work with people like that. I mean, they're going to stand up for principle. They're going to vote no when nobody else votes no. They're going to vote yes when nobody else votes yes. They're going to stand up and make principled arguments that could embarrass the rest of us. You just can't have people like that around.
Well, there was one state senator who was just indicted, and he had gone before, I won't name names, but this is in Georgia, he had gone before the State Ethics Committee and had been cleared of all wrongdoing. So when he was indicted, it really caused quite a stir. That how is it that this fellow could be cleared by all his compatriots there, all his buddies, and yet still be indicted on multiple counts? So it's Georgia's got a problem with its open meetings and open records.
Well, you've got political crimes and you've got statutory crimes.
That's right. And you know, Georgia's not alone. This is a problem across the nation. However, Georgia may be ranking. Matter of fact, I think it does rank near the tops in poor ethics legislation and poor ethics rules.
Would that be near the top or near the bottom?
Yeah, you're right. So, but we face this. Look what's happening in Congress today. When I say today, I mean lately, with the shutting down or the so-called shutting down of the government, when 80% of it or 75, what is it? Only 15% is shut down, and that's for non-essential functions. Well, if it's non-essential, why are we funding it? Christina.
Yeah, there's a pretty good chance that the stuff that's shut down is actually the most useful stuff that they've got going on. I mean, don't we want national parks? We really do want national parks.
Well, of course.
Who else is going to pay for national parks except the national government? And the reason I like national parks is people actually get a little history. They don't get it in school anymore.
Well, you're a political science, you have your PhD in political science, right?
Correct.
Okay. Do you want to talk about your experience as the House historian for the U.S. House of Representatives?
Well, it bears no resemblance whatsoever to political science, but having been up there in Washington and seeing the way things work, and having, you know, once you've worked somewhere, never mind how long, you get really interested in the place, and you follow what's going on. And every time I hear one of the talking heads talk about, here they go again, the Republicans are shutting down the government, how short is the memory of our media? I mean, obviously they don't have a Google on their computers, because this is a tool of government that the Democrats used regularly when we had Republican presidents.
When did they give us a little bit of brief history, recent medium history?
Well, when Reagan was president, you know, he wasn't popular with the Democrats. He's only gotten popular with the Democrats since he's been dead. But when he was alive, he was a rogue cowboy.
Christina, I'm sorry. You mentioned something that just flagged my attention. So he's only been popular with the Democrats since he was dead, but the Democrats love dead voters, it seems.
Well, so maybe they've got his vote. You suppose?
we should check the voter registration rolls somewhere for Ronald Reagan.
Yeah.
But
Well,
go ahead.
Democrats do numbers a little differently than the rest of us. They got confused and added an extra zero in counting how many people had signed up for the Affordable Patient Care Act, health care exchanges in California. Now they said 5 million, but it was actually 500,000.
I had heard it was less than that.
It could be less than. Well, when people make those kinds of mistakes, who knows? Maybe it was 50,000.
Well, if you're making up numbers, who was it that said
they got big ones?
Yeah, if you repeat the lie often enough, people will soon believe it. But repeat a big lie, not a little lie.
Well, apparently, big lies are more believable.
Yeah, Stalin said the death of one person is a tragedy, but the death of millions is merely a statistic.
There you go.
But you were going to tell us, you were going to give us some insight into federal government shutdowns in the relatively recent past.
Well, the one that this shutdown is being compared to over and over and over again, and the Democrats are praying that they get the same mileage they think they got out of the last one. The last one may have eventually cost Newt Gingrich his job because he was the Speaker of the House during the shutdown, but it didn't hurt the Republicans in the short run. They did pretty well in the next election.
Yes, they did.
They converted Bill Clinton from a big government guy to saying the end of big government is over. They got the budget balanced. The president in the end agreed to the budget that Newt Gingrich wanted him to agree to, but the rest of the history is kind of interesting and very different from what's going on now. In April of 1995, Newt Gingrich apparently has a short fuse, and he was annoyed with what was going on with the president, and he said something to this effect: "Come October, we are going to present the president with a balanced budget, and he is going to sign it, or I am going to shut down the government."
Ooh, that was a bad politically oriented statement. That put him in the hot seat, that he was going to shut down the government.
Yes, and he might not have even used the first person pronoun, but that was what the media reported over and over. Newt Gingrich has threatened to shut down the government. And they didn't call him Slick Willie for nothing in Arkansas. So Slick says to himself, let's help him do this. He wants to shut down the government? Yes. Well, we'll just make sure that happens. So the Republicans work hard. They come up with a budget. The Senate passes it because, of course, by now the Senate also is Republican. First House Senate Republican majority since the 50s. Now maybe it'd been longer than that. It might have been since the 30s. I mean, it'd been forever since there had been an entire Congress. And Bill Clinton says no. And so Newt and Bill start this ritual of constant meetings. You remember that?
Oh, I remember that very well. Dick Morris was in there in the background with his counseling on triangulation, which Bill Clinton listened to. And,
right. Well, it might not have been as complicated as triangulation. It might have just been let's let Newt shut the government. Let's shut the government down and let Newt take the blame, because Newt had already in advance taken the blame or the credit. Government, yeah. So every day they would meet, and afterwards, Newt had a funny relationship with the press. He would not call a press conference to tell them things. So he'd walk out of the White House all smug, and a little while later, Bill Clinton would have a little press conference. He didn't used to, we didn't used to always have these talking head press people. It used to be that presidents talked directly to the press. So Bill Clinton would have a little press conference, and he would say that he and the speaker just couldn't agree on anything. But in the negotiations, he would tell Newt that, they were on the same page. This happened over and over and over again.
I remember seeing that, and I remember hearing comments from the people in the press that they couldn't quite figure out the relationship between Newt and Bill Clinton. It said one comment I remember hearing is that Newt has this on-again, off-again love affair with the Clintons.
Yes, he did. He really was fascinated with them. One time he said, and this was reportedly accompanied with tears, that close to Christmas, Newt brought all of his 72 freshmen that he'd helped to get elected and who had made the difference, who turned the Congress, the House, into a Republican House.
Those were the ones who came on board with Contract with America, is that right?
Right. So Newt's meeting with his freshmen, and he breaks down in tears.
Really?
And says
I don't
that
recall
Clinton
that.
Is just, remember this?
No, I don't recall that.
Clinton is just too good. He's just too good. Meaning, everybody assumed that he's just too good a liar. But it's pretty upsetting to the freshmen. I mean, here he is, the leader, and he is just collapsing. The Weekly Standard had a very famous cover on their magazine of Newt just literally melting down, sort of like the Wicked Witch of the West.
Mm-hmm. I remember
just
it
melting.
Well.
Remember that cover? Well, that was in response to this meeting where he literally broke into tears.
My goodness. I'm sorry, I just don't have a recollection of that.
But then in the end, Clinton agreed to a budget that was pretty much the same as what they started out with. It included welfare reform, and in fact, Clinton started taking credit for welfare reform. And that caused another round of upset for Newt Gingrich because he wanted to take credit for welfare reform because, after all, Clinton had opposed it pretty manfully for a year, and in the end, he takes credit for it.
And we've got to give a lot of credit to Dick Morris here. Dick Morris was he helped Bill Clinton back when he was governor of Arkansas, and I don't know if it goes back to when he was the state attorney general, but Dick Morris was the one behind the scenes pushing Bill to agree to this so he could be I think this was before his reelection.
Well, you didn't have to be, you didn't have to be a political genius to see a Speaker of the House threatening to shut the government down is a wonderful opportunity. If you're the president and you're actually the only person who can shut the government down, so you can shut the government down and blame the Speaker because he's already said that that's what he's going to do.
That's right.
But again, see, this time Boehner has said consistently, in fact it goes so far as he's so determined not to shut the government down, he had secret emails between his staff and Harry Reid's. I mean, he doesn't want to shut the government down. He was there when that government shutdown took place, I think Boehner was there. And everybody is telling him it'd be horrible if the Republicans are blamed for shutting the government down. And nobody will talk to him. Harry Reid doesn't talk to Boehner. I mean, his staff talks to their staff, but publicly there's no communication between Boehner and Harry, and there's no communication between Boehner and Obama.
Well,
I mean, it's like the House doesn't matter. It's like the House is just a naughty bad boy that is obstructing progress.
Well, do you think we continually hear the undercurrents that the president wishes to cause chaos and confusion because amid the chaos and confusion, the masters of chaos can work their will while everybody else is trying to figure out what's going on. It's
very hard not to think that that's a very, very likely motive, and I know that the brilliant Dr. Krauthammer doesn't agree with that, and he's warning the president that he could cause chaos in the markets. And every time Krauthammer says something like that, I'm like, don't tell him. Don't give him any ideas.
Yeah, and it seems like the comments on Fox lately have switched to supporting the president, that this whole idea of a government shutdown is going to be harmful to the Republicans. Now, professionally, I'm a mediator arbitrator, so I relish the opportunity for people to sit down and mediate their disagreements rather than going through court, and which is expensive and drawn out. But if you can sit across the table from your opposition and then have a professional mediator, if you're not capable of doing it yourself, be able to arrive at a common solution that benefits everybody, as we understand happened with Tip O'Neill and President Reagan. But if you have one side that's adamant, and matter of fact, they have been adamant, they said, both Harry Reid and Obama, that we will not negotiate.
No, they want a quote clean CR. Now, the listeners know that a CR is a continuing resolution, but I'll bet they've never heard of a clean CR, and the reason is there's nothing clean about a CR. A CR is a dirty trick on the American people where you just keep spending money the way you've been spending and you have no budget.
Well, not only are you spending money the way you've been spending it, but each time we see this come up each year, that there is an increase in the amount of spending in the continuing resolution. And
so it's a particularly unclean CR.
Yes. So they
it's,
have to have other things.
So it's a spending bill with none of the preliminaries that go into budget making. No hearings, no debate, no markups, right?
And I understand also that the CR's language is so nebulous. Instead of providing, as we would see in a budgetary process where X number of dollars are allocated to this program and this department, that it's all allocated to the, should I call it the general fund, so that the president at his discretion can move it around from department to department to program. Is that accurate?
I have not heard that. That is very upsetting. I used to teach a course called the politics of the new politics of the budgetary process. This would be the new politics of the no budgetary process. Yeah, that's really something. That's really something.
Yeah, it is, and that's why Obama.
Yeah, I'm really kind of speechless. We should really end this right now so I can go recover. I'm having a sinking spell.
Are you really?
Yeah, I mean it's really terrible.
No,
I can always talk. You know, I can talk.
Yeah,
I can think and talk at the same time.
Brace yourself, Christina. Take a.
I need some smelling salts.
A smelling salts or an adult beverage.
That's an idea. That's really. I mean, I had not heard that. I hope that's wrong. It's it's hard to find out what the heck is going on. I've not had anybody brief me on this beautiful, clean CR that they want.
Well, with they seem to be able to move the money around like a shell game, because one day, look at sequestration, that Obama has had the prerogative of moving money around for this agency or that agency or this particular military function and ignoring this other military function, so that it could have the greatest devastating effect on our ability to defend ourselves.
Well, I have noticed that, and I kind of assumed that great, huge $750 billion slush fund that was so necessary to prevent the collapse of our economy, which we referred to that whole process as TARP. TARP was not spent for what it was passed for spending.
Christine, let's go back and explore the meaning of TARP and what that was for the listeners, because that happened several years ago, and it's gotten foggy in a lot of folks' mind, and it's forgotten what came from TARP. Can you?
Are you saying that you've forgotten?
No, but our listeners,
Well, let me just tell you that I have a computer right here in front of me, and I just typed TARP into Google. Google has forgotten.
Yeah.
TARP's legacy. Okay, that should tell us what those letters stand for.
But TARP was the funding, billions of dollars. What was it?
Hundreds of billions of dollars.
Hundreds of billions of dollars. As Everett Dirksen used to say, a billion here and a billion there, and pretty soon you come out with real money. What Everett Dirksen
real money. That's right.
He was a Democratic senator, but he would be absolutely flabbergasted now because we're into trillions of dollars, trillions here and trillions there. Pretty soon we're really talking about big money.
Yeah, it was to take care of the troubled assets, and the troubled assets were the bad mortgages that were sandwiched in between good mortgages with the hope of that people would buy them and not pay any attention to the fact that they were that there was bad paper in the bundle that they were buying. And
that was Fannie Mae
credit
and Freddie
agencies
Mac.
were declaring them AAA rated.
Yeah.
So everybody knew what was going on. It was the way the financial sector handled the Housing Reinvestment Act, where banks were not allowed to refuse people mortgages just because they couldn't pay the money back.
And
all right, here it is. Troubled Asset Relief Program.
That's it.
And do you know how much of that $750 billion went to it was directed at the troubled assets?
How much?
$8.6 billion.
Where did the other money go?
They only misestimated by a factor of 100 times.
Well, isn't that the way government works? But was this done by intent or done by accident? And if we look at
that's a really big accident for the Secretary of the Treasury, Frank Paulson, to make. I think it was done deliberately.
Oh, well, I would be inclined to agree with you, but let's take a look at Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and the way they operated. I had heard for years that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, semi-quasi-government agency, was an employment agency for Democrats voted out of office, and when you're trying to get a job, high-paying job for a Democrat, they went there.
Listen, with yes, I think for a while that was true. Boyfriends of Barney Frank and folks like that.
Yes.
But there aren't enough Democrats to do the damage that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac were doing. They were hiring foreigners who barely spoke English and paying them hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to work in those institutions.
Well, let's think about this, Christina. We have seen the power that the President of the United States have with all the things that Obama has done. And George Bush, I remember him saying that we need to investigate Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, but he couldn't get the legislation through the House and the Senate to really put tight controls on it. Now, if that had been Obama wanting to control Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, he would have issued an executive order, being that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac basically fell under the executive branch anyway. And George Bush could have shut it down. He could have gone in there and fixed it, but again, he approved TARP.
Well, if there's any good to come out of the misery of the last 5 years, it is that the presidency is capable of great energy, and all of the energy that the presidency is capable of doesn't have to be unconstitutional. And there were things that Bush could have done that would have made a big difference, and you just mentioned one of them. Well,
and there were other things that strikes me as well. until we saw, we really saw some of the power of the presidency when Obama shut down oil drilling in the Gulf. Remember that?
Right.
A few years ago?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it had occurred to me even before then, but it really highlighted it. Bush, for years, had said that he would like to drill at Anwar. Anwar is government-owned land.
Mm-hmm.
It's a national refuge. So
Mm-hmm.
it's labeled, and he needed permission from the House and the Senate in order to drill, because
or was it from the EPA?
Oh well, it still comes. He was saying the House and the Senate, but the EPA comes under the executive branch, and he could have told the EPA, hey, that's where executive orders are supposed to work anyway within the executive branch. But he was spending $700 billion funneled into the Mid East and Saudi Arabia, his buddies over there, to buy oil, and they used that $700 billion per year to fund a lot of this terrorism that we see today, when Bush could have issued an executive order. And I remember telling some of my good Republican friends that he had the power to do this and why he didn't do it. And the answer that came back was, gee, if he did that, he'd really upset the Democrats. That's
right. Republicans really worry about what Democrats think. Democrats could care less what Republicans think. And the country's about 50-50. So it's kind of like unilateral disarmament. We are so scared of what you're going to think of us that, but what not be invited to any cocktail parties? I mean, really bad things could happen.
Well, we're seeing indications of today that there is this subtle or not so subtle collaboration between the two parties at the top. And several years ago at the Madison Forum, and I am president of the Madison Forum, a nonpartisan organization, so when I'm functioning within the Madison Forum, I take off any partisan hat that I may have, and because we have Democrats, Republicans, Independents, constitutionalists, libertarians, and we've never had a big blow up in all the years that I have presided over that esteemed organization. But,
showing that it's possible.
Pardon?
It's possible to have civilized discourse.
It is possible to have civilized discourse, very, very possible. And one of our Madison Forum members, and by the way, every person who has been on this show has been a Madison Forum member, including yourself. And the Madison Forum is honored to have such intellect and thoughtful people. Yourself.
Well, it's just not an accident, is it?
No,
I mean,
it's not.
If people are intellectual and thoughtful, they're already members of the Madison Forum. So.
Yeah, and we're getting more every day. But anyway, several years ago, I received an email from one of our Madison Forum members, and he referenced the Hegelian dialectic, and that caught my eye, and I did not know anything about the Hegelian dialectic, so I quickly got on Google and searched it and began learning about it, and subsequently. We held a discussion on the Hegelian dialectic at a Madison Forum meeting. Found out that subject was being taught at the University of Georgia as a current topic. But it started out with Friedrich Hegel, a German philosopher in the 1800s.
Das ist Hegel, mein Herr. Das ist Hegel.
Das ist
Hegelian.
Hegelian, yes.
Hegelian.
And what his philosophy was that at the top you can control the argument, thesis, antithesis, and by controlling the argument, you present it in different ways. The two sides or three sides, or the two sides primarily at the top, decide what are going to be your issues and what are going to be the other person's, the other organization's issues. So they then create confusion at the grassroots level among the people, where the people are arguing with each other and debating each other, and the people at the top are just absolutely delighted because they keep moving the issue and the countries and the mass of people into the direction that they want to channel it. So this can take place over a long period of time or a short period. But Karl Marx used the Hegelian dialectic as his method for moving communism across Europe.
Sure.
So I had thought on my initial look at this that this was an old political philosophy and it was not in effect today, but by golly, with a little research and finding out it's being taught at the University of Georgia, and then looking at Priven and Cloward, we find out it's still being used today. And if we look at the parties, the primary parties, Republicans and Democrats at the top, we're finding that they are so much more closer aligned than we ever thought, while pretending that they're not.
Yeah, it's very important that the dialectic continue, and that we continue to line up Republicans against Democrats, because it's helpful for the mirage in Washington. Washington now is really a place where people go to get rich, and a lot of what funds their wealth is the efforts that people make to have their own way politically, but they're not making a lot of progress. The ordinary means of politics has broken down, and that's what stirred up the Tea Party. And the Tea Party is doing things that haven't been done in this country in a long time, like reading the Federalist Papers.
Yes, and the press seems to refer to the Tea Party like it's a political party, but all it is a citizens who have awakened, and they find other like-minded citizens who want to discuss the facts and the issues and become knowledgeable. And by doing so, we've discovered, and I consider myself a Tea Party person, member of several, but we discover that George H. Bush signed the Rio Accords. Gracious, when was that? In the early 90s. That set in place the foundation for Agenda 21. And we didn't know anything about Agenda 21. I didn't until the last 4 or 5 years.
And a lot of Republicans, our Governor Mark Sanford signed on to Common Core,
which is a key foundational or part of the Agenda 21 program.
Yeah, and really, it's all about big data. I mean, the first time I even heard the expression big data, it was used to describe Hillary Clinton's health care plan and how it would help Hillary to get a lot of data on Americans. That the Democrats had been trying to put together massive data files for political purposes, so they know who to contact and how to turn out the vote. So now you've got big data, voting vault kinds of things. You've got big data healthcare, and Common Core is going to give the data gatherers 1,600 data points on every child by the time they're 20 years old. They actually call this data P20, preschool to age 20, and the kids are tracked. They're not just tracked with pieces of data. They also have the machines are put, wristwatches kind of things, are put on their arms to see what sort of eye movements or what sort of it's like these things that Fox is now doing with
it measures your pulse and body
temperature. Yeah, measures your pulse, finds out what you react to.
Right. And then there, on the laptops, there's a camera that can then trace their eye movements and the size of their pupils. Now, for a lot of folks who may not be aware, although I suspect our listeners are well informed and they know about Common Core, but at the bottom line, it's the nationalization of our education system. And when we understand the involvement of Bill Gates and Microsoft into this program where they can make money, but understanding people don't know who Bill Gates really is and who his father was. Do you remember reading anything about Bill Gates' father? And
yes, but I think actually you told me about Bill Gates' father, and I did not retain who Bill Gates' father is. Tell us.
Well, he at one time was the chair of Planned Parenthood. and he was a
Oh,
supporter
no
of
wonder Bill Gates
Ellen
thinks that
Singer.
half the people in the world ought to be dead.
And remember Ellen Singer. Now, a lot of our audience, even though they're well informed, but I think it's important to note who Ellen Singer was, because she's the one who started Planned Parenthood.
I thought Margaret Sanger started Planned Parenthood.
What did I say, Ellen?
Singer.
No, you're right.
You said Ellen Singer. So you mean Margaret Sanger.
That's right. Excuse me.
And isn't Margaret Sanger's grandson the president of Planned Parenthood?
I think
he
so.
wasn't. He was. As recently as 20 years ago, because he wrote a letter to the editor of the Wall Street Journal.
So as we look at what Margaret Sanger's philosophy was, and wasn't she closely aligned with Nazism, Hitler?
She had no problem with the racial theories, because she had pretty much the same racial theories as Hitler. They both subscribed to eugenics, the idea that there are some races that are superior to others. So she wanted the elimination of the inferior races. That's the connection. I don't think she was directly connected to Hitler, but they were both eugenicists. And in doing research at the University of Alabama, I actually came across this stack of bound, yellowed magazines from the 30s, and they were the eugenics. There was a eugenics society, and they had a magazine, and these were the magazines of the eugenicists. So she wanted the white race to prevail, and she wanted to give birth control to African Americans and Indians and other people that she thought were inferior.
So her philosophy was closely aligned in some areas to Hitler.
Oh yes, it's the same philosophy. They might not have been directly connected, but they both believed the same racial theories.
So we see that Bill Gates' father was head of that organization for a while, and now Bill Gates is involved. And I'm not saying that he is a eugenicist by any stretch of the imagination, but it's interesting that he is now moving into our schools to electronically monitor our children and control the education that is given to the children, to the point it looks like indoctrination rather than education as they move.
Yeah, they're getting rid of literature. I mean, the workforce of the global future does not need to read Huckleberry Finn. They just need to read the directions and follow them. And they need to be able to read things like Al Gore's Brave New Planet or whatever it is. And they need to read about Obama's health care. These are useful things that they need to read. They do not need to be reading literature, and they do not need to be thinking for themselves. They just need to follow the directions. And I can understand, the teachers are embracing this, because it is we have a lot of trouble getting students to follow directions. I mean, it's a big problem. But you can teach them to follow directions with good literature or with garbage, and they might as well get some good, humane ideas. That's what the humanities are about, teaching people to be humane, not little mind-numb robots that will follow directions no matter what the directions are.
And good literature, the real benefit of good literature is that it teaches not only the human experience, but it teaches you how to think and not necessarily what to think, whereas Common Core is focused on the ability to read instructional manuals. So
that's right.
When I was in high school, and I graduated from Sidney Lanier High School in Montgomery, Alabama, which at that time we had 3,000 students, and it was rated, the public high school, rated in the top 10 public high schools in the United States. But my English teacher made sure that we read not only the classics, but we read some of the leading thoughts behind it. So one day we had to select our books to read to give a book report. And I just quite frankly didn't know any of the authors, didn't know any of the book titles. So I asked her for help, and I still recall our going to the wall where she had her paper posted, and she went down the list, and she knew me pretty well. And we got to one book, and she said, "Michael, here's a book that I think that you will really like. I think it'll say something to you." And it was Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. And I read it, and it really did have an impact on me, and I read it again a number of years later. So one of the things that I still remember is that education under Huxley's Brave New World. Huxley wrote that, I believe, in the, the 30s, was that society became not just mechanized, but it was very controlled. So it was stratified into several layers. You had the alphas who controlled the very top policy. Those are the people that you would look at in the top leaders, CEO in industry, CFOs, people in Congress, and supposedly the president. And they were the alphas. They were the ones who directed everything. And the alphas were very, very happy in their jobs because they had all the power. Then at the next level, you had the betas, and these were the upper middle class, and they were happy because they didn't really want to take on the responsibility that the alphas had, but they were very, very happy in what they did because they were able to interpret the goals of the alphas and distribute them to the next lower class. So you have the alphas, the betas, the gammas, and then on down to the deltas and the alpha, beta, gamma, delta, epsilons, who were known as the semi-morons, and they were good for digging ditches and doing just strictly repetitious manual labor that required no thought. So as I look at Common Core education,
and of course they're created in the test tube.
That's right. They were taken.
We don't have sexual reproduction anymore. We have.
That's right.
Everybody's a test tube baby, and they're given the right, formula to develop.
That's right. It was alcohol. So they put some alcohol in the test tube, and you gave them a little more alcohol. And then people were encouraged to have soma holidays that take drugs, take booze, psychedelic stuff, and this was before LSD.
And they can go to the Feelies, for more recreation.
It sounds like
remember the Feelies? It's a movie where you actually feel good.
Yeah, Dr. Feelgood.
Yeah.
So we see all of that happening, and I can't help but be reminded each time I look at Common Core that Huxley was a Fabian, I believe, one of the early socialists.
Right.
And this was his vision of it, although he didn't seem to fully buy into it, but he felt that this is where it was going.
Well, and William Galston wrote an article in the Wall Street Journal yesterday, an opinion piece, in which he is wringing his hands. William Galston was a policy advisor to Bill Clinton, and Bill Clinton was known before he became president as a conservative Democrat, and Galston came up with some rather conservative ideas when he was advising Clinton. So Galston, I don't know, he's a professor somewhere. Democrats can leave public life and become professors. PhDs who are conservative can't do that.
Well, no.
Well, they might get to teach a course here and there. They can't.
Well,
they can't just.
How could a conservative ever earn a PhD anyway, Chris?
Well, that's right. It was a fluke. Alabama, Southern. They hadn't gotten a hold of Alabama at that point, but they got them now, I think. So Galston is wringing his hands that the Brave New World is coming true, and that you're going to have really rich people, and you're going to have, and they're going to make all the decisions, and they're going to get all the education, and then you're going to have.
Did he use that term, Brave New World?
He didn't. I don't think he did, actually. He's actually quoting somebody else. Somebody else wrote some kind of dystopia like Brave New World.
Yeah.
I read it kind of fast. I apologize. But anybody can go back and look one day. You can get anything on the Wall Street Journal for about 48 hours, and it's by William Galston, Galston, in yesterday's Wall Street Journal. And I was thinking of Common Core the whole time, because Common Core is preparing for a low-level workforce, an international workforce, where Americans will be the same as we'll have no competitive advantage over Indians and Africans and Chinese. We'll be just like them. We'll have gotten exactly the same education. We'll all be drones for the brave new world.
I remember Hillary Clinton saying in the first year of Bill Clinton's presidency that America is going to have to accept a lower standard of living as
I remember that too.
Bring up the rest of the world. And
the Clintons aren't accepting a lower standard of living.
What's that?
The Clintons aren't accepting a lower standard of living.
No, they're the alphas, and they should not, because the alphas are the ones who really know best and can tell us what we need to do in order to be happy and satisfied.
No, it's very scary, and it's kind of ironic, because Galston really is of the class, like Obama and Bill Clinton. He's of the alpha class, and it's almost like he wants to let people know that he knows what's going on, but he doesn't. He never mentions Common Core.
No, and it was George Bush who, again, coming back to Agenda 21, but Agenda 21, Common Core is just one of the building blocks of Agenda 21.
Yeah.
So
my own thinking is that Bush didn't have a clue, but his No Child Left Behind
he said this
sets
is the beginning
stage.
Of the he said this is the beginning of the New World Order.
Yeah, so, but people have been using that kind of language for. I mean, I'm not an apologist for Bush. I didn't actually vote for him in the 2000 primary, but
I'm not forming any opinions on
this article is called "Visions of a Permanent Underclass."
Yes,
and he does mention 1984. Oh, he does mention Brave New World right at the beginning. But the thing that he's most interested in is an article by Michael Young, major figure of the British Labour Party, called The Rise of the Meritocracy. So he talks mostly about the rise of the meritocracy.
Well, going back, and this is a discussion not just to beat up Bush, but we have to understand where all the data dots are. So I'm not forming opinions or stating my opinion on Bush, other than the fact, just stating the fact that he's the one who signed off on the Rio Accords, which is the foundation of Agenda 21, which is being promoted and adopted, not adopted by, but the UN was the one that was pushing it. And so when you look at the trail of events and actions, then that speaks for itself. Again, I thought nothing of it at the time that this happened. I'm not even sure that I was aware of it until years later, so that we can begin forming and seeing the patterns of all the data dots and where they have led us. Well,
I finally figured out the purpose of this article, because I didn't read it carefully. Whether by design or accident, the author of The Rise of the Meritocracy, his book represents a fundamental challenge to government-hating, market-worshipping conservatives. It poses a question. If this is the consequence of your creed, are you prepared to endorse it? To liberals and progressives, what are you going to do about it? And to all of us, is this a country you would want to live in? And this is the description of the country. It's 10 to 15% of Americans would enjoy fantastically wealthy and interesting lives, while the rest slog along without hope of a better life, tranquilized by free internet and canned beans, bread and circuses. Does that sound like the Republican vision for the future, or does that sound like Common Core, health care, food stamps? I mean, blaming the purpose of this is he sees this as the future. He wants us to be blamed for it.
Yeah, right out of Aldous Huxley and the Fabian Society. What astounds me is that they keep wanting to categorize Tea Party folks and conservatives as government-hating. Actually, we're the ones who strongly support the Constitution. And the Constitution.
We're the people who used to have signs on the back of our cars that said, "Support your local police."
That's right. Christina, as always, it's been an enlightening and an informative discussion, and I'm just thrilled to be able to have one of these discussions with you periodically, and it's always interesting.
Well, ditto from my side.
Well,
and now I will go and have that adult beverage.
Me too. And
that's iced tea in the South. It's iced tea.
Yeah. Well, we'll be back next week, and we hope that you have found the show to be both informative and interesting. Please tell your friends about the show and where to find us, because if we are to turn our country around, it'll take all of us working together. Many thanks to James Strawn, the technical producer for this show, which is carried on decidingthevote.com. And my email address is mopitz, O-P-I-T-Z, @mindspring.com. Remember, knowledge is power, ignorance is slavery. This is Michael Opitz, wishing you a blessed day.